Welcome to this YouTube channel. In this video we are going to talk about Islamic Republic of Iran Armed Forces. So before starting this video, like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel for future updates. The Islamic Republic of Iran Armed Forces are the combined military forces of Iran, comprising the Army, Artesh, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, Sepah Pastaran, and the Law Enforcement Force. Iranian armed forces are the largest in the Middle East in terms of active troops. Iran's military forces are made up of approximately 610,000 active duty personnel, plus 350,000 reserve and trained personnel that can be mobilized when needed, bringing the country's military manpower to about 960,000 total personnel. These numbers do not include law enforcement force or Basij. Most of Iran's imported weapons consist of American systems, purchased before the 1979 Islamic Revolution, with limited purchases from the Soviet Union in the 1990s following the Iran-Iraq War. However, the country has since then launched a robust domestic rearmament program, and its inventory has become increasingly indigenous. According to Iranian officials, most of the country's military hardware is domestically manufactured, and the country had already become an exporter of arms by the 2000s. Unable to import weapon systems from abroad due to international and U.S. sanctions, and suffering from an increasingly aging Air Force fleet, Iran has invested considerable funds into an ambitious ballistic and cruise missile program for long-range strike capability, and has manufactured different types of arms and munitions, including tanks, armored vehicles and drones, as well as various naval assets and aerial defense systems. Iran's ballistic missile and space program is an internationally hot political topic, over which it has consistently refused to negotiate. Iranian authorities state that the country's missile program is not designed to deliver nuclear payloads, but used only for surgical strikes, and is therefore not relevant to any nuclear negotiations with the P5+1, the UN Security Council's 5+1. All branches of the armed forces fall under the command of the General Staff of the Iranian Armed Forces. The Ministry of Defense and Armed Forces Logistics is responsible for planning logistics and funding of the armed forces, and is not involved within the Field Military Operational Command. The Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces is the supreme leader, while the President is the second in command. After the coup in 1953 against the democratically elected Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh, Iran began purchasing some weapons from Israel, the United States and other countries of the Western Bloc. Later on, Iran began establishing its own armaments industry. Its efforts in this remained largely unrecognized internationally, until recently. Following the Iranian Revolution in 1979, deteriorating relations with the U.S. resulted in international sanctions led by the U.S., including an arms embargo being imposed on Iran. Revolutionary Iran was taken by surprise by the Iraqi invasion that began the Iran-Iraq War of 1980 to 1988. During this conflict, there were several conflicts against the United States. From 1987, the United States Central Command sought to stop Iranian mine-laying vessels from blocking the international sea lanes through the Persian Gulf in Operation Prime Chance. The operation lasted until 1989. On April 18, 1988, the U.S. retaliated for the Iranian mining of the USS Samuel B. Roberts in Operation Praying Mantis. Simultaneously, the Iranian armed forces had to learn to maintain and keep operational their large stocks of US-built equipment and weaponry without outside help due to the American-led sanctions. However, Iran was able to obtain limited amounts of American-made armaments when it was able to buy American spare parts and weaponry for its armed forces during the Iran-Contra affair. At first, deliveries came via Israel and later, from the US. The Iranian government established a 5-year rearmament program in 1989 to replace worn-out weaponry from the Iran-Iraq War. Between 1989 and 1992, Iran spent $10 billion on arms, some of which were designed to prevent other states' naval vessels from accessing the sea, including Marines and long-range Soviet planes capable of attacking aircraft carriers. A former military-associated police force, the Iranian Gendarmerie, was merged with the National Police, Sharbani, and Islamic Revolution committees in 1990. In 1991, the Iranian armed forces received a number of Iraqi military aircraft being evacuated from the Persian Gulf War of that year, most of which were incorporated into the Islamic Republic of Iran Air Force. In 2004, Iranian armed forces took Royal Navy personnel prisoner on the Shat al-Arab, Arvand, River, between Iran and Iraq. They were released 3 days later following diplomatic discussions between the UK and Iran. In 2007, Iranian Revolutionary Guard forces also took prisoner Royal Navy personnel when a boarding party from HMS Cornwall was seized in the waters between Iran and Iraq in the Persian Gulf. They were released 13 days later. According to Juan Cole, Iran has never launched an aggressive war in modern history, and its leadership adheres to a doctrine of no first strike. The country's military budget is the lowest per capita in the Persian Gulf region besides the UAE. Since 1979, there have been no foreign military bases present in Iran. According to Article 146 of the Iranian Constitution, the establishment of any foreign military base in the country is forbidden, even for peaceful purposes. On December 4, 2011, an American RQ-170 Sentinel unmanned aerial vehicle (UAV) was captured by Iranian forces near the city of Kashmir in northeastern Iran. In 2012, it was announced that Iran's Quds Force is operating inside Syria, providing the government of Bashar al-Assad with intelligence and direction against rebel opposition. In November 2015, Iranian special forces assisted in the rescue of a Russian pilot that was shot down by Turkey over Syria. In April 2016, Iran sent advisors from the 65th Airborne Special Forces Brigade to Syria in support of the government. In 2016, Revolutionary Guard forces captured U.S. Navy personnel when their boats entered Iranian territorial waters off the coast of Farsi Island in the Persian Gulf. They were released the next day following diplomatic discussions between the U.S. and Iran. On January 3, 2020, the commander of the Quds Force of Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, Qasem Soleimani, was assassinated by U.S. drone strike near Baghdad International Airport. His body was identified using a ring he wore on his finger, with DNA confirmation still pending. In March 2021, state TV in Iran showed footage of a missile city armed with ballistic and cruise weapons described as a new Revolutionary Guard base along the Gulf Coast. What do you think about this video? Do let us know down in the comments section below. If you enjoyed this video and want to hear from us again, be sure to hit that subscribe button before you go.